I've always, when I was a kid, I had just this fundamental love of God. I loved the church. I loved everything about my church life. Really great experiences with my parents and with my siblings. So there's no reason for my story other than it was just my journey. My preteen years, I started to hang out with a crowd of people that were a little bit different than my church people, and started experimenting with alcohol, started drinking, and it was just a off and on thing then, drink for the party, drink for fun, but that became something that I began to depend upon. And I graduated from high school, went to NLU, met my wife there, started dating my wife in 1996. But in 1997, my mom and dad were in Laramie, Wyoming, and my dad had a massive heart attack and died. I was not equipped to process that in any way, shape, or form. I started drinking kind of with a purpose, and I got real angry. I think, hindsight being 2020, I was angry with my dad and I was angry with my mom and my family, but I transferred all that onto God, and I got real angry with God, and I got angry with the institution of the church, and I just started drinking with a purpose to kind of blot out all those emotions that I didn't know how to handle. I had this beautiful girlfriend, had all these things going for me, had a great job at the time in college, was loving college life, but I just began to be taken over by alcohol. And that progressed, I started to suffer repercussions for my actions, and, but drinking wasn't the problem. It was everything else at that time. It was like, well, if I still had my dad, or, if you guys just understood me, that carried along until, I was able to get married. In 2001, we got married and we started our life together. We eventually moved to Ruston. We're living here in Ruston, and I'd gotten a job in Monroe, and I was working with people with special needs, trying to find employment for them, and I was enjoying what I was doing, but I was still drinking. I was doing things that I regretted having done. I'd wake up the next morning and I'd mean it with everything in my being that I would never put my wife or anybody who loved me back in that situation again. And sometimes within 3 days, I was right back doing exactly what I had done the night before or whatever, and had broken all those promises. And if you're not an alcoholic, or if you're not an addict, you may not comprehend this, but there is no lower place to be than to actually mean that you're not going to do something again from the bottom of your heart, like to mean it to your core, and then to repeat it immediately, almost like a reflex. My wife had left town for a work trip again, and I didn't have anybody to watch out for me or govern what I was doing, and I started drinking on a Friday. By December the 20th of 2002, I woke up on the side of the interstate at a rest area, passed out in my car, and I had a court summons in one pocket and a bail bond slip in the other, and I pieced together kind of what had happened the night before. Looked down at my cell phone, because we had cell phones at that time, and I had about probably 20 missed calls from my wife. I thought to myself, what kind of lie can I tell my wife, to cover this up? And but what came out of my mouth was, I'm sick and tired of lying. And it was God. I'm sick and tired of lying. And God did for me something that morning that I couldn't do for myself. He just kind of opened up the floodgates, and he allowed me to experience all that pain and all that suffering that I'd put some people through. He allowed me to feel it for the first time. With I was as low as I could possibly get. And what's really the sovereignty of the Lord on display in my life is a year earlier. My wife was, before we had gotten married, my wife was living with a young lady who was an alcoholic, or professed to be an alcoholic, and I never really believed that she was then. She told me one day in the hallway after one of my scrapes, she She just said, look, Caleb, if you ever want to stop living the way you're living, I know how you can do it. And that's all she said to me. And that morning I called her, and she answered the phone, and the first thing out of my mouth was, I'm an alcoholic. This is Caleb, I'm an alcoholic. And she replied, I know you are. Everybody knew I was except for me. So I called Alcoholics Anonymous that morning, made sure that there was a meeting, and I went on December the 20th at noon. There, for the very first time in my life, I admitted to myself, I actually admitted to God, and I admitted out loud to other people that I was an alcoholic. And here's the miracle of that. There was a long process of me repairing the damage that I had done, but right then and there, that morning, when I admitted to my innermost core that I was an alcoholic and that I needed help, God answered my prayer and gave me the help right there. I have not taken a drink of alcohol since that morning, December the 20th of 2002. So I celebrated 20 years of sobriety in December. God plucked that problem away from me. And then began the process of using Alcoholics Anonymous to draw me back to himself. It took a little while before I actually hit my knees and I asked for Jesus's help, because I had to lay down some resentments and handle some bad beliefs that I had. And it took a while to unwind those. But God being sovereign, God being loving and in his grace, about 2 years in to sobriety, we had our first daughter. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that my children have never seen their father take a drink. Adrian and I had actually gotten into just this nasty fight. I mean, we were yelling at each other, and I'll never forget it. We lived in a little frame house off of Vernon Street in Ruston, and she came stomping over to me. You could hear the pitter-pat of her feet across the wooden floor. She stomped over to me, and she just pointed right in my face and said, I liked you better when you were drinking. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I knew who I was when I was drinking. And I knew that something was missing. I had this AA and this sober life, and I had a fundamental idea of God, but I didn't have Jesus. And I asked Adrian, I just said, Adrian, do you want to go church shopping? She was, yes I do. And so our plan was to go around and check out all the churches in Ruston. And we came to Christ Community. There's another little just sovereign thing of God. I sat down there in that chair, probably about where I sit right now, in the bridge, and I said a prayer there. Jesus, if you are real, I need you to introduce yourself to me, and I need you desperately, because just not drinking wasn't cutting it. I needed a Savior. And Dickie Love was the pastor, and he stood up there and he delivered a message that echoed everything that I'd heard in AA. And when you hear the truth, you just hear the truth. And I needed it. God smacked me upside the head that morning, and we never left. We immediately started taking suggestions, introduced ourselves to some staff members. Staff members are like, well, if you want to be a part of this church, you really need to get involved in a small group. So we went and got involved in a small group, and I sat in a small group of probably 20 people, and was terrified, but I told them what I'm telling you now, and I was received with love and grace. Some Me Too's came out of that. I got to meet some people that I never would have thought struggled with anything like I had struggled with, who had struggled exactly with what I'd struggled with. And God has redeemed all those things in my story that I never would have thought that I could live with or tolerate. He's redeemed them all by making them useful. There is nothing more powerful than sitting across from somebody and having them confess their worst, and having somebody sit across from them and say, yeah, me too. Here's the way out. Me too are two of the most powerful words that I've ever heard. But, bonding over the bad things that I've done wasn't enough. There's plenty of people sitting around in bar rooms right now that have lived my life that I could go hang out with and have relationships with. The people I bond with are the people who are seeking the same solution that I'm seeking, and that's Jesus Christ, living, active, and working in my life on a day-to-day basis. I would say this, you know, in a church the size of ours, there are people in our church right now who are struggling with addiction of some sort. You know, I can speak specifically to chemical and alcohol addiction. If you need help and you want help, I'm an ear you can talk to. I can help you find resources that will help you come out from under. But more importantly, I can just stand alongside you and love on you as you make that journey, because that's what I needed. Would also say that if you're the mother or the spouse or the child of somebody who's struggling with addiction, don't stop praying. I firmly believe that my mother's prayers saved my life. I firmly believe that the truth that she continued to deliver to me all the time, that Caleb, your way out is Jesus Christ, is what led me back to the cross and drew me back to the cross. Don't stop praying. Don't stop. Don't ever give up. Protect yourself if you must, but don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. I don't know that man that I was, you know, but I don't ever want to forget him. Yeah. You know, he kind of walks beside me and reminds me constantly, because I don't ever want to go back to it. And the crazy thing about it is I am just one drink away from going back. I ask every morning on my knees, Lord, help me stay sober today. And then every night I'm on my knees and I thank you. Thank you, Lord, for helping me stay sober.